And we're live. Nice.
All right, welcome everyone. The intro already play?
Did it? I don't know.
I don't know.
I didn't see it. I didn't see the little countdown thing.
We're so good. We're so good at this.
We're killing it. Definitely not a symptom of being roughly
The dad
40 years
cast.
old on average and having other shit to worry about.
Let me.
Sorry.
Oh yeah, we're
time, Jeremy.
I just checked. We're totally live. Okay, then I'll go ahead and kick it off. Hey, welcome everyone to X1. X1 is a show dedicated to lists and experiences for the rest of us. One of you guys is echoing, by the way. So those of us who won't be winning GTs consistently, but either might fuck around with a fun list, or are totally cool with going 4-1, but you might find yourself in the finals and know what to do when you get there. If you're trying to balance work, family life, and myriad other obligations of old person life with your competitive passion for 40K, this is the show for you. Cliff, why don't you hit us up with the call to action and the Patreon stuff?
Hey, so if you're watching this, you're probably already part of the Discord and already familiar with the work that Stat Check does. We've got our flagship show on Tuesdays at 6 p.m. Eastern. Stat Check featuring Innes, Wilson of Gene Stealer Colton Tyranid fame, Anthony Vanella, Nathan Henning, and Jeremy Atkinson, the whole crew typically, giving you a stat-based rundown on the previous weekend's events and, talking random nonsense. Got to keep it clean for the first segment of YouTube videos. Talking random nonsense about the meta, what to expect, different lists, what they're working on, usually in tandem with a guest who is lucky enough to be a part of their conversation. You can catch us on this channel, youtube.com/StatCheck. You can also catch us on Patreon. Google StatCheck on there, search for StatCheck on there. You'll find us. By joining us on Patreon, you'll gain access to a Discord, which has like a little bit over 200 members now, featuring some of the most sophisticated and fancy people and high-performing people in 40K. Not sure how that happened when people like me are allowed to be in there, but here we are. And also tournament organizers and national team vets like Nick and like Tim. Hit us on Discord and Patreon. Hit us on YouTube. Catch us on your favorite podcasting app. Or Stat Check. You'll get another one of those in like an hour.
Cool. So let's go ahead and just run down, if you're joining us for the first time, the intros. My name is Tim Pinney. I'm one of the co-hosts, obviously. Former captain of Brohammer, co-founder of the Miami Dice team. Now I'm active on Team USA. We haven't figured out starters yet, so fingers crossed. But one way or another, I'll be there in Belgium to support in August. Now a co-member of the Stat Check crew and your local Unga Bunga advocate. Cliff, why don't you run down your intro?
Hey, I'm Cliff Thomas. I'm the nerd behind the scenes working on the 40K data dashboard. That's basically it. I'm known for meme lists and trying to do as well as I possibly can with said meme lists. As Grant is pointing out, I love the Castellan. I took it to LVO. That was a silly idea, but was super fun. And now I'm working on Death Watch, which is a similarly dumb for competitive reasons thing that I'm doing. But again, here we are. I'm going to make it work.
Cool. And then our guest of honor tonight is Nick Allsdust Nick. He is a very active member on the Stat Check Discord. He's also obviously a passionate gamer, dad, and a TO. We thought he'd be a great fit to bring onto the show because we haven't really explored the TO side of things, which a lot of our patrons and peers they like to go that route. So Nick, why don't you talk to us a little bit about yourself?
Oh, hey, well, thanks for having me on again. This is it's quite flattering to be on this cast, so thank you very much. Yeah, I'm Nick Blackburn. I live in Ottawa, Ontario, so that's about like 2 hours west of Ottawa. For people not from Canada, I mean, most Canadians don't know where Ottawa is, anyways. And I guess, like the intro said, I'm the 40K gray man. I don't have the kind of credentials you guys do. I mean, locally, I think I did reasonably well in some some GTs and whatever else to get to that X1 status. I guess the big kind of talk recently around where I am is the event that I started up with some friends called All Is Dust. That's going to be happening in just about 2 weeks now, and yeah, really, that's it. Avid Thousand Suns player. Yeah, sometimes I guess when I'm bored of work, I spend too much time in the Discord and harass everybody. And yeah, that's basically me.
Cool. Well, this part of the show we usually kind of catch up because obviously we're busy. We do the show every other week. Cliff, what have you been up to since episode 2?
Yeah, so I've been working on my internet's being a little goofy, so let me know if you can even hear me.
We can hear you fine.
Great. So
high five.
2 big things over the last couple weeks. I'm trying to make more improvements to the dashboard to make it more manageable and like accessible to people, because I can get stuck in like data visualization nerd space. So it's really good to have people in the Discord who are actively giving feedback and saying like, hey, it'd be great if it could do X, or like this view looks a little weird. Can you fix it? So one of the other perks of joining the Discord is that you really do get like live opportunities to engage with the work that we're trying to put together. And we're like super appreciative of critical feedback, because it helps us make stuff better, and that in turn makes us able to better deliver goods out to the world. So working on the feedback for the dashboard. It now displays like win rates for all the factions, win rates for all the sub factions, populations for all of those people across the board, overrep across any given period of time. And overrep's our stat that compares the population for a faction in the top 4 group of players compared to its population in the overall playing meta. So if you've got a lot more people in top 4s from a given faction than you have in the overall pop, you're going to have really high overrep, and that's a signal that your faction is probably a little overtuned, and vice versa if you're underrepresented. So that's been cool. And then I've just been trying to figure out, one, what a competitive Death Watch list would look like. Like, this is one instance where I actually am not memeing, and I'm just trying to find what I think would be most effective. And it's really hard. It's what I'm finding. I've gone through like, I don't know, 10, 12 different iterations of lists. It's actually sort of it's an interesting experience for me, because I'm not used to not memeing. So like diving into the Death Watch and Space Marine codexes and trying to figure out like, okay, what is actually doable in here with a 39% win rate faction has been an interesting exercise. So it's cool. One upside is that in today's in Games Workshop's Meta Watch video today, they indicated that Death Watch 1 is at the bottom of their list of performance for all factions in the game, which is cool. So I would expect them to get some love post Adepticon. So maybe I'll be that guy that's building a terrible faction list only to find out that I am now playing a list that's overpowered. I can ride that pony all the way out to the summer. But yeah, that's me. That's the last 2 weeks. Oh, and like random thing that happened to me today. Amazon delivery comes by the house, drops it off. Philly is like known for people that roll up on your porch and just steal your packages, and then like either run away or hop on their bike. So my wife was home today. Amazon comes, drops some stuff off. She gets up to go get it. Finds a guy who was on a bike speeding off with it. Calls me down. I'm in the middle of a meeting. And I'm like, one moment, please, on Zoom, and run this guy down over the course of 3 blocks. Catch him, get my stuff, threaten him not to come back around these parts again, and then come back to the house huffing and puffing. So that was an
madman. Was it like gold that you were getting shipped? Like you would put yourself at risk like that?
I know. I know it's crazy. I was talking to Monique. Monique's my wife's name. I was talking to her about this after, and I was like, man, like maybe I need to talk to somebody, because like run a guy on a bike down for like, I don't even know what was in the Amazon package. Like, I don't know, $15 worth of item is not necessarily the healthiest reaction to something.
Like your 12 gel pens you ordered, you were
like
stabbed over that.
I could have just could have re-upped and kept it going, but whatever. I'm a little bit of a psycho. It is what it is.
I mean, you could try one of those Amazon lockers or something like that. Seems like what I would do.
Yeah. Kelsey, unreal.
All right. Cliff is going to take a break to and come back to us. He's going to fix his internet real
Fix my
quick, try to
internet. I'll
fix
be right back.
his video. For me, I actually went to a GT, and then I played my first round of the Vibe Check League. So that was pretty good. For the GT, it was the Hey Wanna Play Salty Classic. It's named such from a long-standing inside joke that is just not even going to bother explaining because it's like it only makes sense to 3 people, and if I explain it, now the joke's not funny anymore. But basically, I took World Eaters. I took the cookie cutter kind of list, or I guess I would call it the cookie cutter list. It was Invocatus Warlord. I took a second Juggernaut Lord who Anthony and I have been going back and forth on and testing, and then we started adding him. We really liked it. He takes the Relic weapon for Tesla 6s, and most importantly, Strength 9. So every 6 to hit is 3 hits, and then if you get the Blood Tide for Exploding 6, every 6 to hit is 4 hits. He also gives you a second source of the +2 movement aura, which is great for an army that relies a lot on movement because it's purely combat and usually has to close distance safely and make, and getting 2 inches closer before you start to clear your charges is huge. And then also having a second combat unit in the list that can be screened, can be character screened is also super important, especially because as you're closing with your opponent and you don't have shooting in this list, you don't really have a way to reduce their firepower before you close the distance. So just ways to not get shot, transports, carriers, stuff like that are all things I rate very highly for that type of list. I had 2 units of 5 8-bound, which are kind of like your workhorse units of the list. They receive buffs really well. Hey, welcome back, Cliff. A unit of 3 8-bound, and then 3 units of 3 exalted by Cliff. 4 units of 5 berserkers with the eviscerator, the icon. I put the icon on the eviscerator because that's the last guy that's going to get pulled. A unit of jackals who I don't really like them, but the way the points work out of that list, it was either put in the jackals and then put in an extra random 8-bound somewhere, or just play a 1965 point list. So hey, someone's got to hold the backfield. That list was good. Oh, and 2 rhinos and 3 spawn. That list was good. I think going in the future, I think I'm going to go back to the previous iteration where I run 5 units of Zerkers. The backfield unit doesn't have an icon. It's a little bit stronger versus planes. I played in the planes twice, and they got a little touch and go with primary once the planes come on the field. And I also played against mortars once. So the 3 games where I played against either planes or harpies, I really did enjoy the jackals because I had to basically put them in a rhino and leave a rhino back there as well, just so I wouldn't randomly get knocked down 4 points on primary. I would like them better if they were just cultists, but you're paying 20, 25 points more for like 4 strength, 3 attacks per dude that like you don't really need. So now there's Zerkers, and it's going to be 3 units of 4 8-bound, and then everybody else is pretty much going to be the same. So I think it's where we're going to be in the future. Quick rundown of the rounds. Round 1, I played against Gene Circle. I think it was on conversion. I had a pretty open. We were playing a GW format, but there's a pretty big like wall missing on one side of my ruin, which I didn't love. So I just kind of tried to put everything in there. He went first. He's like, "Oh, hey, by the way, I excavated. You're -2 to hit." I'm like, or -2 to move. I'm like, okay, great, whatever. He goes first. He pushes up super aggressively with the bikes. He shoots to a rhino that I had like in front of the building set up, where basically if it disembarked, if it got blown up, depending on what he had left to shoot, it could either berserkers could jump forward or they could jump back out of line of sight. Just being able to move models in your opponent's shooting phase, I think, is very strong. So I had it kind of set up there just because I didn't want to be completely hidden. I wanted him to come closer to me to try to shoot stuff. He shot the rhino with a bunch of industrial weapons, so I just kind of sat there and just took it. And then he didn't kill it. And so he started shooting like bullshit weapons at it. And at that point, I popped -1 to hit with smoke. And it lived on 1 wound. And he was banking on these berserkers to pop out and shoot them. And then he couldn't. So he just had a bunch of units just didn't get to activate. And his entire army was like 12 inches away from my entire like World Eaters army.
Oh, that's a big deal.
Yeah. So I was kind of like,
it's
okay,
clobbering time.
Yeah, exactly. Like I basically just pushed the gas down super hard at that point. And also it was the first round of the vet, so I'm usually pretty chill. I'm not playing any teammates, so I was kind of like, look, man, I was like, we got the master clock right there. I was like, I'm always down to play with the clock, but I know some people don't want to. I was like, here's how it's going to be. Like, if you don't want to play with the clock, if we have a game left after an hour, we'll just split the time 30-30. That ended up happening because he was there was a lot of like a little like analysis paralysis or explaining things over and over and over again that I had told him I understood, which I think is like maybe he was just nervous or something like that. Because then we got to an hour and I said, hey man, it was my turn too. We got to an hour. I'm like, hey man, I'm just gonna put us on the clock. We'll just split it 30-30 from here on out.
Yep.
And he kind of fell apart, and I kind of went into the 2 minute. I kind of went to the 2 minute drill, and then he kind of like fell apart. And it was at that point, but it was the big issue was against World Eaters. They really need to be hitting multiple units to kind of make up for the fact that they're not doing damage in multi-phase. That way to keep the attrition equal. And in the G-Circled army, I mean, you don't really want to be getting hit anyhow, but the best way to stop that is take those big bike units and make kind of like a wall like this, and it just absorbs that initial impact. And that's it. Everything else is behind it. He didn't do that. And he had a bunch of like weird breakdowns of the bikes, like hitting like a 4, then like a 6. And it was just like, it was really random. But he had them like balled up and kind of like next to each other like this.
So you were able to get your 3 4-1 basically.
Yeah, well, not even that. I went for like the high probability charges. The Exalted went in, like 2 units of Zerkers went in, and a unit of 8-bound went in. And I didn't even like really kill that much. I think I killed like a unit of Acolytes. I think I killed a bike unit, and I think I wounded it like a unit of Neophytes. But I was able to like tag like 4 different units with 4 of my units. And so he had to roll 4, or I had to roll because the World Eaters players one that rolls it. The no fallback aura on a 4-up, it's 6 inches off the Exalted. And I had like 4 or 5 units tagged with that. And so we had to roll like 4 or 5 4-ups in a row. And if any of them failed, half my army was unshootable. And so we got like 2 units in, and then, like he couldn't fall back, and we're kind of like, and he's kind of like, okay, I think the game might be over. And like at that point, because at that point, like he's stuck in his deployment zone. I'm unshootable. He can't fall back. He's just like stuck there with me. I have my backfield like completely screened out with like spawn and all sorts, and like empty rhinos and all sorts of other bullshit. He had like 1 Ridge Runner that was like peeking into my my ruin, and like a random Berserker unit from the Rhino that lived like went over there and took care of that. Because I didn't really want that poking at my backfield. And at that point, I was literally in all 4 corners of the board. So that game ended. Game 2, I played against Curtis Hodling, one of the best guard players you've never heard of. I'm telling you, this guy, he doesn't travel because he's very much like he just loves to play guard. And when guard's not good, he goes and plays golf. And when guard is good, he comes back and plays it. But he was making the 8th edition book work for a long time. He's got a very healthy like approach to the game. And he always gives me like good games, even when the guard book was bad. And he's just been like a monster with this book. So I played against him, and we played. I think it was Recover the Relics, which is kind of like a staring contest kind of one. And like this is where I was learning a lot about the list. Where like I think a lot of times I need to take banners, and I haven't been. I've been taking like the book secondaries. And so he asked me a lot of questions about the pregame movement, about that, because I think he'd played it like 1 game before with me, but he was just double checking, asked about the threat range, pregame move, like what could happen with this, what could happen with that, and everything like that. We spent a solid 10 minutes like just talking about all the theoreticals for the game start, which is always the hallmark of like a great player. And he respected it. He literally deployed his entire army 34 inches from my army, and whatever couldn't fit on the table went in reserves.
Love it.
He didn't give me like
committed
an inch, nothing. He was like, he's like, I want it to be mathematically impossible that nothing, not even a single guard gets charged turn 1. I was like, cool, which is fine because that's like one of my opinions was the best part about the pregame move is just the respect. You don't have gun lines just deploying on the line and being like, well, you can't charge me, so I'm just going to deploy in the open on the line. I didn't even go first, so I just kind of like hard shifted all my units into like one of the ruins. And then we kind of measured out like his pregame moves or his redeployments, where he can go and everything like that. And then we kind of like realized like, hey man, if we just kind of sit there and look at each other, like the guard player wins by 15 points, you know. So he moved up. He didn't really shoot anything. He just threw up some banners, stuff like that. And I was kind of like sitting there. I was looking at it. I was like, I sat there for like 5 minutes, just looking at the board, just thinking about it. And I was kind of like, all right, here's what we're gonna do. I put all my 8-bound into one run, and I pushed everything else. I just ran it up like one side of the board on a flank.
Yes.
As everything's coming at you, like the entire army. And the idea was that one flank was the side where like he didn't have as many tanks on. So to kill all this stuff, his tanks were going to have to come out. This is GW terrain. Remember, they're going to have to come out and get angles. And if you're just inside 20 inches, that's like the magical number with World Eaters, where like either you're moving 11 or you're disembarking and moving 8, the 3d6 charge, +1 charge, CP reroll, everything. That's about the magic number for like where you can kind of like making charges with regularity. So the theory was that I was going to push everything out. I was going to lose like 80% of it, but the 20% I would just come up with the game plan on the spot. And then he was also going to come out into threat range of the 8-bound, which were in the ruin. Because remember, GW terrain, there's like 2 ruins that they're kind of like this. This is the one the 8-bound were in, so they're a little bit closer. So the idea is he was going to come in, get those angles, and now he's going to be threat range, and all my 8-bound were going to slam into the side of Lehman Russ's. And that's basically what happened. And I was playing with scraps that game, but I was able to get a 12 for 2 turns in a row, hold him to a 4 for 2 turns in a row, put up some big numbers on the secondary scoring. And then after that, once I was functionally tabled, he had to do a mad sprint to get on my side of the board. But I had this small unit of 3 8-bound, some spawns, some rhinos, like a character, just like random crap that it was like kind of hard to remove with borders. And the closest ruin to him, I was protecting with a heroic intervention from behind a wall. So he really had like no way to affect it. And he tried to push over there with a sentinel. I intervened on it. Sorry, no, it was he got out of heroic intervention range. He's tried to send over sentinel. I ran over, charged it, and then used consolidate to get back into the ruin. One guy couldn't swing because I needed him to consolidate back to a spot where he could recover that objective with the heroic intervention. And I ended up winning that game by 7 points. Round 3 was Mark. What was who did I play round 3? I don't actually remember. I have to look that up.
What faction were they playing? That's the important thing.
I don't even remember, man. Hold on, I got BCP right here. This week has been a blur. Let's go past events. As soon as I look at it, I'll remember.
The World Eater stuff is so funny to me because you can go out and make these sacrifices so long as you're sitting on the appropriate objective.
I played another teammate, Louis Akala. He was running just literally max Death Dreads and Killicans. And that was actually a little bit of a slog because he had my regular 8-bound just did like really nothing because they were strength 7 damage 2. But he was just feeding me so many units and so many vehicles that near the end, I actually had max buffs for the last 2 rounds of the game. And he ended up having more stuff. I ended up pretty much like getting tabled that game, but I won that one pretty hard, like 90-50 or something like that. That was a really fun game. But when those 2 DACA jets came on, life got like really awkward for me. It was literally just like rhinos and berserkers and like cultists just like doing like shuffles and hopping around my backfield. And it was just so awkward. And the entire time I was like, God damn it, why the fuck did I take these jackals? They're 20 points more than cultists, and I hate this, and this sucks. And it was terrible. I hated it so bad. But yeah, I've been talking about orcs. I play orcs too, and I've been talking about how like I think a single DACA jet is really good to have on a list. He ran 2. I didn't like the second one, but the first one like really made my life hard. Round 4.
I love when you make a list decision that you really don't, and it's like a little thing, but then it just bugs you the whole event.
Yeah.
Oh my god, these jackals were just bugging me the entire. I hated them. I hated them so bad. They were just a total boat anchor. And the worst part was they were chinking the armor that people were actually trying to actively exploit in my list every single game, and I hated that. Round 4, I played the eventual winner of the event, Mark Parker. He was running Nids, and they put so much less stuff on the table than he did before, but I really like his list. We've been working together on it, and he's basically has a Leviathan list for the floating hit or wound reroll. Lots of heavy venom cannons. He's running 2 Walkerants, so 2 T8 guys that are character screened by a bunch of Tyrant Guard, and they both have the relic guns. And then one of them is OBSEC. And he has the Harpies who start in reserve, so like nothing's really getting shot turn 1.
Barb Stranglers or Venom Cannons on the Harpies?
Whatever the one that has a bunch of damage 2 shots.
Stranglers. Okay.
Yeah, that was it. Stranglers.
Yep.
I liked them a lot. And then he had one of each type of troop unit, and then he had like 4 Carnifexes and a unit of Zoes, and that was it. Those Carnifexes, they still slam. That's a very easy list to put together here on the table too. This was a lot of people were kind of like this actually got brought up a lot because Tyranids. There's a lot of videos and everything online because Tyranids won a GT, and a lot of people were like, "Oh, blah blah blah." The Warriors player got screwed in this mission. I'm like, nah, not really, because I knew this mission was in the packet, and I didn't feel like the existence of this mission negated the strength on the other 4 missions of having the pregame move. And the thing is, I can still move in my own deployment zone. Mm-hmm. So on this mission, Abandoned Sanctuaries, it's like the one with the cross. All the objectives are roughly in the open, no matter like what terrain set you play on, which is a little bit awkward. If you try to take Rod, you're not staying objectives. Banners is like, it's really hard to score more than 5 on banners of this one. Even retrieve data, it's hard to score more than like a 4 or an 8 on it. It's really, really, really rough if you don't have good standard secondaries. So luckily the Warrior secondaries are pretty good. So my game plan from the start was to basically take over one of the ruins, because remember, it's GW terrain, and make a triangle. And basically just cover 3 of the 5 objectives, like with like very, very, very high probability. I'm talking about like 3-inch charges, which is doable with how that terrain setup is. At this point, the undefeated people we had 2 undefeated Iron Hands. We had undefeated Genester Cult, and a guy who's been playing Genester Cult for a long time. We had a guy playing Swift Strikes, Masterful Shots, Craft World, with 6 bike units and a bunch of bike characters. And then we had Mark. So my options were to get potted, because it could show up in your deployment zone, get potted by the other guy, because it could show up in your deployment zone. But luckily the rest of the lists are kind of slow. I'm like, okay, that's not great, but I think I'll take those. Genester Cult, who kind of just, they can get around the pregame because their wording, it lets them show up like at the end of like the movement phase or something like that. So they get around and no scout moves. So that's advantage for the Genester Cult player. The Craft Road player, who would love nothing more than for me not to be able to show up on their doorstep, and then turn 1 they show up on my doorstep anyhow. So that was like a bright red matchup in that. Or the guy who can't go through walls and has a slow shooting army. I knew I'd have to go through Mark eventually, so I wanted to go through him on this mission. And I basically just executed what I said. I made like 1 or 2 small misplays, like very small, and Mark's a great player. But unfortunately, I think the thing that kind of broke in his favor is he went second. So he was able to score so many points. He was able to like basically make up like a 20-point swing, because he gave me a heroic intervention on turn 2 or 3. I jumped out, killed a unit of his troops, got Blood God's Due on 2 objectives in his turn, and then deleted a move block they'd set up, ran over with that unit of 8-bound in my turn, who was on an objective, and killed his OBSEC Flyrant, or his OBSEC Walkerant Warlord, which then shut off all his imperatives and took that tool out of his pocket. And it just ended up being like a ton of points. And then I move blocked everything else that was in there between those 2 ruins. So that was a huge swing, but he made it back turn 5.
Wow.
Sanctuaries is just basically that. If you go first, you have to plan you're covering 21 extra points over the course of the game. Because that's what happens. They'll, they go second, 20 extra points or whatever it is. Yeah.
Yeah, it was bad. It's her, and then round 5 was another matchup that another teammate of mine, Will Lozano, again one of the best players you've never heard of because he doesn't really travel, but just incredible top tier player. And you have to, if he's at an event, you're going to have to go through him. And he was playing a very shuriken heavy swift strikes, masterful shots, very movement based bike list with a big unit of Wraith Guard, or whatever the ones with the guns are. As kind of like his anchor unit. And that was a very cat and mouse game. I can't remember the name of the mission, but it's the one with like the 2 rows of 3 objectives, and it's like a Dawn of War. And I basically just did the same thing. I set up in the ruins where I could cover threat on like 4 out of the 6 objectives. And I think this is only his second game into World Eaters. So he like knew what they do, but the practical experience like wasn't quite there yet. And then I think he didn't account for the fact of how fast I'd be scoring, and then I was just missling over like Zerkers over and over again, just to like kind of like dump on his primary scoring. And by the end of the game, I was kind of like running low on assets, so I literally just went to like preservation mode. I put like Zerkers and Rhinos, drove the Rhino into a corner. Rhinos were charging like his little units to prevent him from doing like the scout objective. I was trying to like kill anything that was going to get like behind enemy lines, that kind of stuff. I ended up winning that game by like 3 points. Unfortunately, because of battle points ties, I lost to the event winner by 1 point. And then Curtis, who I beat by 7 points in round 2, he came in second place. And then Will, who I beat by 3 points round 5, he came in 4th place. And I got bumped to 5th place, even though I beat 2 of the people above me. So moral victory, but yeah, I ended up coming to 5th in that.
You guys don't do win path for rankings over there?
I don't know what the TO. He has multiple businesses. He's into Magic. He's into Pokemon. He's like he loves the 40K. He doesn't really play it anymore. But like we're just another game in a series of like games and customers that he tries to keep happy. So he's not like as like involved or plugged in as like you and I are, stuff like that. Okay. So like, there's a good chance that we've shown him how to do it before. There's a good chance that he just kind of like did something a little bit awkward. So it is what it is. But I was still very happy with that. Learned a lot because that was my 10th game with World Eaters. Vibe Check League, I actually played a game last night. I was testing out a new CK list that literally went wide on chain cannons and then had 3 executioners and 2 carnivores. And I looked at my round 1 pairing and it's guard. I'm like, great, this is not good because I'm mostly playing Chaos Knights for Team USA. And so this is not really a pairing that we try to put me in. So I was like, okay, well, let's see what he's got. Okay, he doesn't have 2. He had a Dorn, he had his tank commander, he had 2 Russes, and a couple Sentinels. I'm like, okay, this isn't like too bad, but I'm still like not looking forward to it because he had 2 units Karskin or whatever, and it was on Recover the Relics, so it was going to be a little bit of stare off. I'm like, okay, that's kind of in my favor, and it was table 5, I think, which like it gave me a pretty safe deployment. And then there was 1 ruin that I could kind of push up into and get dread range on half the objectives. And I was like, okay, well, I can score Ruthless Tyranny 3 points a turn, so that's 15 in the bank right there. I could probably get 2, maybe 3 points on Storm of Darkness, which is the action secondary for CK. So it's like 8 to 12 there. What's my third going to be? I really had no way to really interact with his tanks except for punching them. But because this mission is kind of a stare off, he doesn't really have an incentive to come to my side of the board. I don't really have an incentive to come to his side, and I don't really have a way to do so safely unless I just come out and rush, which then leaves me open to falling behind in primary in the late game. And then even then, I've done the math, like even with some buffs and everything, and assuming I have all knights alive, I kill like 1.5 Russes a turn, and that's assuming that like before we even start getting the modifiers and everything involved, so it's not super viable. Luckily, I don't have to spend CP on -1 damage. I don't have to spend CP on interrupts, so that meant I was going to be flush with CP to do the Herpetrex strat for the AoE mortals, and then Ravenous Terror Shades and mine in his turn. That combined with the 7 indirect launchers I have meant I had a way to interact with his stuff without really exposing my assets. And so I asked him what he gave him a no prisoners, and he's like, I don't know, it's not that high or whatever. It's like a 7 or 8. I counted it. I looked. I'm like, okay, it's like a 9. I'm like, that's good enough. He's like, you sure? I'm like, trust me, man. I'm sure. I'm
it's better than 0. Good.
Well, because if I went for bring it down, I'd have to expose multiple knights to kill a single tank.
Yeah, you're gonna lose.
Guarantee it, and then I lose them in return. So it just whereas I could just indirect fire, Ravenous Terror Shades. Maybe if they get too close, Herpetrax. Maybe do an cheeky auto explode here or there, like stuff like that. A guy can advance because the chain cans are assault, get angles. So it just felt way safer. I did a mock deployment while we were there, figured out what I could hide. 2 guys would have gotten shot, so I just reserved the carnivores. I didn't really have a use for them. They didn't have indirect. And because of all the indirect I had, it actually forced him to put his Casterkin off the board. So that was a huge value gain for me.
Yes. Three quick clarifications before you keep going, Tim. One, Vibe Check League is we randomly have a 72-person TTS league that is like become a GT filled with a bunch of incredibly talented players. More reasons to join the Patreon and get into Discord. 2, Tim, if you could talk a little bit about 1, like how cheap the access to like decent indirect fire is and Chaos Knights is, and then 2, specifically, I'm guessing you were running your Bebop and Rocksteady for the carnivores.
I was running the Bebop and Rocksteady.
If you could talk a little bit more about those 2, because they're like low key and incredibly powerful duo slammed into things together.
They did nothing this game, but that's fine. They're not for this matchup. Although I did. The game was starting to kind of go off the rails a little bit, like early on. So that Dorn was posted up in a really commanding position, but I was able to bring in. I had 2 wounded knights that were like barely holding on to the objective, and they were in a perfect spot for those Casterkin to walk on and just split fire and pick them both up.
Yep.
So I screened them out I brought in the Nurgle Knight from reserves to screen out the one spot because he couldn't show up in my deployment zone. He couldn't show up behind me, and he'd be out of range if he showed up on the other side. So I brought that Nurgle Knight, screened him out, but that Nurgle Knight was also in dread range of the Dorn and several other units. And I pushed up 2 stalkers on my left flank, and I was like, okay, well, hopefully one of these idiots lives. And then I could start pushing on his flank. And I reminded him, I don't think he really had to worry about it, but I think it got in his head a little bit. And by the way, the guy I played, Isaac, great player. I could tell he said he'd only been playing for a year, but it was just the power of TTS. He said he's been getting like 5 games a week, mostly with the Imperial Knights and Guard, and it was showing. He was a very competent player, very good player. So he ended up having to put a bunch of firepower into this Nurgle Knight, and I obviously popped Rotate. And the idea was it was just going to soak up as much firepower as possible. And then my 2 other stalkers between range and angles and dense cover and stuff like that one of them would live. And then I could start like threatening his game plan on his flank. Well, the Nurgle Knight lived on 2 wounds. So they just walked forward onto that objective right there. Because if it tried to charge and tried to take out the wounded Leman Rust, like if I failed 1 save, it'd be dead. So I was like, I'm not going to go for it. It's too greedy. It shouldn't be alive anyway. So I just stepped onto the objective. The 2 other stalkers walked out there, basically just murdered two guard squads and 2 sentinels, and I held them to a 4 that turn. And at that point, it was just trying to like keep my assets alive, try to like hope for a 3rd Storm of Darkness, which never materialized, and then just keep trying to kill his infantry while losing as few assets as possible. And so I ended up losing that one, but it was like 79 me and like 93 him. It ended up being like a 12-8 differential scoring, which
that's
being
like
for my worst matchup, I was like super happy with that.
Yeah, you'll take that any day,
every time.
Well, especially because he shot the crap out of an executioner, put it down to 3 wounds. He shot another knight that he like. I was trying to be as well as I could to not give him multiple angles onto like any single knight, so he had to like split fire his shots, let Dread do his work, whatever. He shot another knight, killed it with the Dorn. It blew up. It hit 5 other knights. One of them was that wounded knight. I rolled 3 wounds to it. It blew up. I did like 19 mortal wounds to my own army. Like I couldn't even be mad. I was just like, all right, that happened. So getting a 79-93, like 12-8 differential, like while doing 19 mortal wounds to myself on like turn 2, like bottom of turn 2, like I was kind of okay with that.
Have you just considered not doing 19 mortal wounds to yourself?
Yeah.
Like
I keep forgetting. I'm like, this game, I'm not going to do 19 mortals to myself, and it hasn't caught on. So 2 of the things I was trying with that list was precision cruelty executioners. I didn't get as much of a testament that list as I wanted to, but also with the mission. Everything was basically either a guardsman behind a wall or like a T8 or T9 tank. So it wasn't like ideal. I would have loved to shoot him as sentinels, but he was doing very good, like not giving me those. He was pretty worried about them, but I was kind of like, My game plan at this point was just pretty much to not interact with his vehicles at all. I was to go after his dudes. Bebop and Rocksteady, that's something that Anthony and I have tried before in Stalkers, and it's been cute, but we tried it with Sentinels, and it's been really, really, really good. Basically, that's what I meant, carnivores. So basically, now that we're kind of like in a shooting meta, like I've kind of been leaning more towards going more shooting with my Chaos Knights. But there's still matchups like Custodes, World Eaters, stuff like that, where people are going to actively try to aggressively push up into you. So these carnivores, their whole job is to go in a pair, and they go out and they intercept melee and start trying to stage before they can actually get into you. They have the speed to do it. They don't really have guns, so you can just advance them like one turn. Then they move 14, so they can just run around like these ruins, especially these WTC ruins, which eat a lot of movement trying to run around them, and they grab stuff. Basically, the Slanesh Knight, who's the one that really grabs it, he's the warlord, which lets him heroically intervene, which gives you a little more control. And then he takes the Helm of Dogs. So when you're staging, he can give rerolls to your other guns, but more importantly, he gives rerolls to himself, and he gives rerolls to the Nurgle Knight in melee. Because when these guys are in melee, it's probably going to be the most critical fight phase of the game. Because it's going to be game defining usually. It also gives him an extra attack. And then he has the Slanesh Beguiling Majesty upgrade, which is when he is targeted as a source of melee attack, he's -1 to be hit, and he's -1 to be wounded. When he is favored or blessed, he also has a 6-inch aura, not against him, but an aura of -1 attack. The Nurgle Knight is the default is an aura of -1 strength. And then when he's blessed, it's an aura of -1 toughness, which is kind of handy, but I'm really here for the -1 strength. And so basically, if you have like a big brick, like a big unit of wardens or something like that, I will charge and I'll put one of them on both sides. So that way, like in the middle of the brick, like you'll have like a guy in the middle who can't swing because he's holding coherency.
Yep.
And then like these two, look at my fingers, these two will go into like Slanesh Knight, and then like these two will go into the Nurgle Knight. And everyone, the ones that go on the Slanesh Knight are -1 strength, -1 to hit, -1 attack, -1 to wound. Then you pop -1 damage on him. If it's just a big unit like 8 bound, and I tested this against Anthony Vanilla's World Eaters, where I basically I was using my experience playing World Eaters. I basically just set up my entire army. I was constantly just kind of kiting him and just trying to find spots where he couldn't really jump from terrain to terrain, and I was about 21 inches away. So I knew that he could theoretically make the charge, but he had a high probability of failing and then just getting countercharged or shot for free. But he was starting to push up 8 bound into me. And so I pushed the Slanesh Knight, and I charged in the Slanesh Knight. I based a bunch of 8 bound. I had the Nurgle Knight behind a wall behind it, so his aura, because a War Dog Knight base is like 4.5 inches, something like that. So the Nurgle Knight was behind it, not in combat, because if he got swung on, he's easier to kill. So I wanted to force as many attacks into the Slanesh Knight as possible, and popped -1 damage. Now these 8 bound, I mean, yeah, they have like the Sergeant hits kind of hard, but the regular guys, they have like 28 attacks at 732. Well, now they have 6 attacks each. So that's 4 attacks gone from them, 5 attacks gone from the squad. They were hitting on 4s, they were wounding on 6s, and they were -1 damage. And just like, and he brought in the Zerkers, and then the Flames, like he brought in the Zerkers too, and they were in heroic intervention range, and they were object, and we were on the center objective. I'm like, Anthony, do you want to heroic intervene? He's like, yeah, I'll go ahead and heroic intervene. I'm like, perfect. I swung on the Zerks first because it was only 2 dudes, killed them, turned on my blessing. Now the 8-bound were -1 attack. He swung into them and just did absolutely nothing. And basically that duo sat there and basically tanked like 3 World Eaters fight phases on that center objective, while the rest of my army was just kind of like hiding him and shooting him up. So I think I'm going to go other places with the list, but that duo is like definitely going to be in a lot of my lists. And that's pretty much it. That's been my 2 weeks, but it's been very eventful.
Yeah, getting after it. Nick, man of the hour.
You guys are a heck of a lot busier than I am. That's for sure. My I guess last 2 weeks has been work. I don't even think I've managed to play a game. I haven't played an event since LVO actually.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, it just be like that, right? It's I mean, there was a GT that Francois had won like a couple weeks after LVO that I considered going, but I mean, after just getting back from Vegas, that was a hard sell. But no, I mean, my biggest things the last 2 weeks, we have a team tournament coming up, the Canhammer team tournament. It's like the flagship event for all of us. Like there's 2 of them, Capital City Bloodbath, but especially Canhammer because it's the big team event of 32 teams descending upon Ottawa to fight it out. It's also a qualifier too. So now we're all like thirsty. So I've been busy kind of just, getting the team, trying to help get organized. We're discussing a lot of lists and whatever else, what we're going to take, how we're going to try to be clever, which obviously is going to bite us in the ass when we come to the event. And then the other thing is just, doing the all is dust thing, just organizing, making calls and doing all the stuff you do to organize an event amidst kind of, I guess, the theme of this cast being a dad, looking after the little one. I mean, I work from home, so I mean, that helps quite a bit, but still, I mean, between, daycare closures or, sick, you have to go there, then appointments, they get home early, it's, it gets busy, but that's really about the size of it. I live a pretty boring 40K life right now, I must say.
Let's talk a little bit more about the TO work you've been doing over the last few weeks. Because it's not like the last 2 weeks is the first time you've really started working on this. Like months ago, you had been for this. You were talking about it in the
August.
You've been getting after it for a while. Like, so I guess, can you talk a little bit about one, just sort of what the stages of planning look like for putting on an event this size? And then like what sort of time commitment that requires early on? Like, what are you trying to assess early on? How much time does it take? How does this work sort of shift as the actual event approaches? And then what are the things that have been unsurprising to you based on your understanding of events as an attendee and a player and now a TO? And then like, what have you been surprised by with respect to like organization, time sucks, things like that?
Sure. I mean, so I'd been talking about this since August, I think, in the Discord. So I had only been recently added to a kind of local Ontario TO chat in August. And so I was looking at the calendar, for 2023 and the first, say, 5 months of 2023. And it was looking kind of thin at the time. Of course, it's August. But I'm a kind of person that likes to plan well in advance, and I'm just one of those guys that has everything kind of planned out, all the connections made in my mind. So I was like, oh, well, that's kind of thin. So I'd been attending events since, I don't know, 8th edition Warhammer Fantasy. So I figured, well, it was high time for me, because I see historically, like, events were kind of, the TOs were really just giving up their time and actually subsidizing in a lot of ways events for people to attend. That's what it ended up being. You just had the guys that made a little bit more money than everybody else that are, got at it, and they would run events, and that's essentially how it went. So I thought, well, okay, I mean, there's no events. We don't have any in my area. And I mean, it's high time that I give back a little bit to the community. I've been going to so many events. So you know what? I want to give back, and I'll run one. So that being said, of course, if you're asking like, what are some of the key components of running an event? Well, so far, I mean, there's kind of a couple of things you need that decide the go no go at least, and one is terrain. Like if you don't have terrain or access or means to get terrain, well, I mean, you're not running an event by and large. So what had happened in August, I was like, okay, I kind of mentioned a little bit, I'd considering it, like kind of sending out feelers and whatever else. I'd actually started emailing different retailers, like Glasshammer actually, because they have like preset tables, like they have table layouts that they give with the sets that they sell, and the sets that they sell are actually fairly cost effective. Nice. I can't speak. Sorry.
Is that nice?
Yeah. I can't speak to like how effective they are. I mean, I've heard from some people that they like them. Like any other terrain set, there's pluses and minuses. But I was like, you know what? Good enough for me. The issue is at the time, Glasshammer didn't have like, they're in the UK, so they didn't have a stockist or distributor on our side, and so it wasn't really feasible to be like, oh, can you send me 50 tables of terrain, and then around us, we don't at the time didn't really have somebody reliable that could deliver like 50 sets of an MDF style terrain. So that all being said, this thing almost kind of like just didn't happen because like, well, I guess I don't have terrain until my buddy texted me. He owns a bunch of stores in Ottawa, and he'd been collecting terrain for a while. Like this is something he'd been doing for a while. He owns a store and whatever else. And he had put a big order with somebody, and it was, slowly collecting his like 30 sets or 40 or whatever of this same terrain. He's like, hey, I can help you out. And I was like, awesome. Like, okay, like let's think about this. And so I'm like, okay, I got terrain. So like, that's the first component. So the next component is a venue, right? So depending on where you live, I guess venue costs can be astronomical. So I don't know how kind of familiar you are with the Canadian scene, but we just had our kind of stud or snotling. Yeah. In run by the Stud or Scrub podcast in Toronto. Anyways, I won't divulge their financials, but like their break-even point was considerable, right? So, that's another thing you have to think about. We'll talk about later, but so you have to find a venue that is kind of, in a sense, cost effective, or you're confident you can get the people there to break that cost on top of your other expenses, whatever else. Now, the benefit of being I'm in this weird kind of la land. I'm in a military town next to one of Canada's biggest land bases, and we're full of special forces, Air Force, officers, garrison HQ. So there's a lot of like actual the median income where I live is one of the highest in Canada, just because by virtue of that little town of 17,000 people, but they're all officers and operators and Air Force personnel. So like they all make money, right? So anyways, but it is a small town, so like the venue areas are much cheaper. So I found our civic building or town civic center had a sizable room that they would rent out for, I guess, people's weddings or whatever. And it was very clean. It was nice inside, nice kitchen. The washrooms were the first thing I checked out. Well done washrooms. I don't know. If you've been a sweaty nerd long enough, you notice the washrooms are kind of a big thing. I've been there the days where you'd go and the washrooms are grimy, the toilets are overflowing, and you're like, I'm going to go crap in the parking lot. So like, hopefully we've reached a different standard. Anyway, so yeah, so they were available. The price was right. So I threw it on I paid for it immediately. Like, cool, let's do this. So I was like, I had the venue, I had the terrain, but now like I got to get bums. Like I got to get like not bums, but like bums in the seats. I need to get people at the event, and I need to. So the one thing, being part of the Stat Check Discord, I've noticed you get, like you said, this amazing access to top players like international. Like I think Liam Hackett just joined the Discord recently. Like wild, right? And
joined our TTS league, which
sucks
for everybody else, but
yeah. Okay. Well, anyways, that was fun. My chance to winning that.
No, that's the best part, man. You actually don't want to win the stat check because that means you're playing against like really challenging players.
Yeah.
Like That's what ended up bringing me in.
List.
Yeah, we'll be an interesting 0-1 bracket in that TTS.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's a problem with that 5-check league. Even if you lose, you could be playing like top players. It's like, oh, geez, so much fun.
You're like everyone's going to come out of this. Like almost everyone's going to come out of this league like a better,
significantly
person.
better.
100%.
Isaac, I didn't know anything about Isaac, and then I played into him, and immediately, I mean, granted, like the matchup, the faction matchup, like wasn't really in my favor, but immediately it was like any GT I went to, I've never had a round one that hard. You know,
oh,
like
of course,
round ones usually get me. In my first round one, I was like, oh, hardest faction matchup, and then like a confident player. Yeah. But I mean, that's what we always talk about. Like, granted, it's hard, and that's a big part of this episode is like how to maximize, or the show is how to maximize your time. But he said he's like I like TTS because I was never able to get this many reps in playing the live game, and I do like the live game. But he's like with TTS, he's like I'm getting like 5 games a week, you know. And I'm like, I don't know if I could personally get 5 games a week on TTS, but I could see like if it's a little bit of a lighter week, that does seem reasonably doable. Like, you know, maybe not every week, but if you have a lighter workload like that week or something like that, like it's possible. But that was the power of repetitions, because I could tell that was just from playing into a multitude of people multiple times a week, and just the constant quality practice. And it really just kind of like drove that point home, in my opinion.
Yeah. So 100%. And so the Discord has tons of like top players, very experienced players. So you're able to kind of pull, so, you know, you can do that for your game plan, like playing the game, but you can also do that from the coordination, like event coordination perspective. Like, I mean, you and I, Cliff, had spoken at LVO, and I'm like, hey, man, like, this is your first big event. You went to the biggest one. So, okay, great. But like, what jive for you? What like didn't work for you? And, you know, that's that kind of insights that I was like, okay, like I was keeping in the back of my mind, like terrain, unclear. Not only was it not, you know, I mean, we could all forgive like some of the sets of the terrain, but what was sometimes a little bit unforgivable, that it was very obvious that, you know, how the rules were set up for those terrain sets led it to very blowout games, right? So, okay, so obviously, like having clear terrain rules that feel balanced, you can never make everybody happy, but as best you can with the tools you have, like, can you make clear, competitive, relatively balanced terrain layouts? Or, you know, we use player place, but how do we try to ensure that that's as, you know, balanced as possible? So, you know, that was one. Another thing you had mentioned was the kind of just the like coordination perspective, just like how the event itself is being handled, like communication. Do you know what's going on? So, you know, that was one. Yeah, that was one thing. And there's also from an FLG perspective, like a name recognition thing. So my next thing was like, okay, I mean, there's a lot of people there's enough people in, I think, the Ottawa, Ontario, Quebec meta that know me. I you know, like I'm not that big a deal, but I think I've been around enough that enough people know me from that area. But to really get out there, get a name out there, that's when I was like, okay, I need kind of name recognition. I need people's confidence that, you know, when they arrive at the event, it's going to be handled in a professional manner, particularly when it comes to games. So that was another comment you had made. It's like, I wanted a judge. I could not see a judge anywhere in this event. So I could not have any kind of ruling adjudicated. Like it was up to us to figure this out. And if it was going to be a tense affair, that was going to be unfortunate, because, you know, we wouldn't have, you know, you would be spending 10 minutes on your own clock to go try and find a judge somewhere. So I was like, okay, well, you know, that was your feedback. That's feedback I had heard before. I've been to a ton of events. I've had the same issues. So I was like, okay, I texted Jeremy. Who do we all know? Jeremy's a good friend of mine. And I was like, hey man, do you want to, would you judge this event? Like if I run this, would you help participate and judge? And he said he was 100% happy to do that. So, I mean, those were kind of like the 3 major components of starting this up: was finding the venue, the terrain, and like just getting the fundamentals ready. Like, you know, bit pimping Jeremy out a bit, like being like, hey, look, I got Jeremy, come to my event. And like, I mean, it worked. And so, yeah, that was it. And then, so that's the first, I would say, kind of like stage of the planning procedure is just like the date and time, whatever else. We took some risks too. So we chose Adepticon weekend. So Canada is kind of like event wise always been a bit in the US's shadow. Like I've been in this game from Warhammer Fantasy to now long enough to know that like years ago we'd have like 1 or 2 events here. The rest, like if you wanted a big event, you're going to the US. So you go to Nova, you go to Vegas, you go to whatever, right? So what that meant was, as our event calendar, like on our side was building up, people were always nervous to book around those big US events. Like don't book around Nova, don't book around Adepticon, the Las Vegas Open. But then as the US as well started having more and bigger events, it's like, well, we can't follow that pattern anymore because we're not going to have any weekends because we're going to just always be booking around the US. And as much as those events are great, I think all of us are like fairly well-to-do in the sense of like the upper middle class guys. Like I can't spend $5,000 every weekend going to an event, right? That's just, that is beyond my means. So, anyways, the one risk we took was we looked at Adepticon. It's kind of one of those events that if you've been going for years, you're going to go, but it's not one that's going to attract the new generation of competitive players, or like the players like Tim and I that have always kind of eye on like just refining that competitive edge over the years and making it better and re-envisioning how that looks for events. So anyways, decided we're going to do Adepticon weekend. We're going to lose the guys going to Adepticon, but then we're going to gain the people that that otherwise didn't have an event that weekend because nobody would book that weekend. So that was kind of the first stage of it all. And so, yeah, I planned a little early. I honestly thought I was doing it in an empty calendar. I wasn't really expecting the calendar on our end around this time to be so busy. I fired it up and we started getting some registrations and stuff. And I think that's kind of where it goes into that second stage. And I guess it depends when you start planning and the size of your event and the scale. Like me, it's only a 60-person GT/major. Like I'm not organizing the WTC. So like obviously the level of planning and coordination is much simpler in a sense than it is to do that for the WTC. So like when you're looking into the October to December timeline, at that point, it's a bit slower, right? It's a bit, I'm going to draft up the player pack. It's limited the amount of strict, decisions I can make now because we know like the meta shifts. We, sometimes you have to call audibles and whatnot. But like in the new year, we'll be able to start making firmer decisions. And that's like your kind of third stage, like leading up, your 3A stage leading up to the event. That's when you start like, okay, refine the player pack. What are the missions? If there's a fact specific FAQ, like we're going to serve food. So now I have to get the caterer. Then there's the whole budget component, which that actually started, in stage 1. I know. And that's another thing too. I'm sorry, I'm a little scattered, but it's another thing too, in like I take for granted, I will say, and it's kind of like a place of privilege, that in the initial budgeting step, I know for a lot of people, for some people, it can be like a big financial commitment to be like, I'm going to run an event. And if this doesn't work out, I'm kind of screwed, right? For me, it was always a bit of I'm going to run this event. If it undersells, it's going to be a hit to my ego, right? It's going to be like, oh, well, nobody came to my big birthday party. Oh, woe is me. I'll just kind of consider like I paid to have a cool Warhammer party. That's kind of in my mind, kind of like if it didn't work out, that's how my mind would just look at it. Like I just ran a party for my friends and I'm okay with that. Obviously, like about sometime a couple weeks ago, last month, it just completely sold out and went wild. So I don't have to worry about paying really out of pocket for it, though. Still a little bit because like there's always more and more and more I want to do. So I'm always like, yes, we're going to do this and this and this and this. But yeah. And so, yeah, then the last kind of part is like kind of the ruthless nitpicking, the ruthless, like poring over every word you write, everything you do, hearing what people's comments are like, I guess I'm not going to sit here and say I know exactly what makes a successful event. We haven't had it yet. I mean, it's successful so far in the sense that we sold a lot of, like, we sold it out and we have this long waiting list. I mean, it won't be successful if everybody leaves and they say, yeah, that was complete garbage. But I think what's going to be maybe a little different than what some people are used to is that, when players are like messaging me, I'm taking it to heart when they say something, when they're like, hey, I think this, they're not making the decisions, nobody's like, bullying the TO in that aspect, but I am taking to heart like people's concerns, like, and as much as like, like I'm doing this kind of voluntarily, like I'm not getting paid. There's nothing in the budget paying me per se. That doesn't give me, I find, the right to just disregard how people are spending that weekend. Like, regardless whether you make money for an event or whether you're just doing that because you want to run an event for some reason, you're asking people to spend their money, their hard-earned money, and their hard-earned weekend time to come to your event and enjoy that. So I think out of that respect, that mutual respect there, you got to do your best to deliver the best that you can. I mean, it's not going to be, gold handles and stuff like that. There aren't going to be massage tables. Sorry, Cliff. But I mean, like, at least in terms of the experience of playing Warhammer, having 2 dedicated judges, having food, having, like, terrain layouts, clear rules, like, I think that's where we're going to deliver. And, hopefully people enjoy it and they want to see that event come back next year. We'll continue to iterate and, continue to improve on it. I mean,
Charles S in the comments brings up a good point. It was something I was considering. He says, I would go to Canada for a good event before going to Adepticon, to be honest. And I was thinking about this when you were talking about how you don't schedule around these big events and everything. And as recently as like 3-4 years ago, you had your your big 3 super majors, and then you had like maybe like in the US like another 5-6 majors that happened around the year, and then you had like a handful of like 30-40 person GTs, like a handful, and that was mostly it. Now we're kind of into a thing where we have like 2 to 3 majors and then like 5 or 6 GTs every single weekend.
A lot of events.
And there's a lot of events, and I think especially like post pandemic and everything like that, people are more than happy to not go to the big event and just kind of be stressed and feel and like that, because it kind of feels like I've noticed, having gone to like LVO multiple times, having to go into these bigger cons and everything, and then having gone to like the GT up the street, or like 2 hours away, something like that. That kind of like big stress of the terrain like not being quite there, or you may get blown out, or you may get like that one, you're traveling like with your luggage and your army and everything. Just that constant undercurrent of stress had kind of gotten normalized a little bit, and it was almost like you were expected to just like kind of put up with it. And so I think there is actually kind of like a market there to now purposely schedule an event during these big events and kind of treat it a little bit as like a loss leader, where it's like, okay, you're probably going to be in the red for your first 2 years of doing it. But if you just focus on providing like a good quality, low stress event, hey, you give me money, I give you clearly written GT pack, clearly written schedule, and then like decent terrain and like good judging, to the point where like it happens at LVO. I've had to make like internal decisions where I'm like, okay, this my opponent's taking me a little bit for a ride. What he's telling me doesn't quite pass the spell test. But do I want to burn 20 minutes of clock time over this? So you just kind of make these little concessions that like an unscrupulous opponent can like take advantage of, and next thing you know, their advantage has gone like 1%, 2%, 4%, 5%. It just adds up over the course of the game. And you're just like, but you could never find a judge, and the judges are always like, oh, just call a judge. I'm like, well, it's not just call a judge. It's burn 30 minutes of your clock time trying to hunt down this guy. And then not only that, if you have to leave the table, you're like, am I going to come back and all the models are going to be like suddenly off the objective? All of a sudden like they're in line of sight. Like is it worth it? And it's just at that point, it's like a failed game state. So why even bother?
Yeah.
And so like I think people kind of actually enjoy these middle-sized events, like these 5-6 round events of 30 to 80 people. That's a really good size. There's some bigger events that I'm going to go to, but I'm certainly going to a lot less of them next couple years because LVO is like $5,000 to go to now. And honestly, I think the big events, I think on their own inertia, they're going to be around for several more years. But I think more of the really competitive people, especially if the ITC, like the rumors of it getting bought out by GW, and they're not posting it, and ITC points aren't the end all be all anymore.
They never were.
Yeah.
Well, you say that, but they really were. It drove a lot of people to spend. Like it drove a lot of people to go to like 24 events a year.
People want to see the big number get bigger.
Yeah, they want to see the big number get bigger. So
it's a competitive like endeavor, right? We all want to see our, it's like that street cred thing. It's a validating thing, right?
That was functionally like that was like it wasn't the true like ELO, but for most people, like it was for several years, it was the de facto ELO. Like that was their pride point more than any one big individual event. I mean, sure, like if you won LVO, if you won NOAA, like whatever, that was cool. But that's what people were chasing. And so now, like if that goes away, I think that's just nothing but like a good thing for the game because now people could just focus on going to these medium size, like truly independent, like medium majors, like large GTs, stuff like that. And that really feels like where the heart and soul of the competitive game is right now.
Yep.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah. I mean, like how many top players at LVO, I mean, not to rag on LVO, and we don't have to belabor the point too much, but like how many were just, I walked up to this table and that was the wrong table. They got first drop and that's it. My run for this whole event is over. And I mean, I don't think myself personally, when I went, I think I'm a skilled, competent player. I'm not, I'm not Innis, I'm not John Lennon, I'm not all those guys, but I can disappoint some people sometimes, mainly myself, but some others sometimes. But like for me, I got there, I played Alejandro Serrano from Spain, top like Blood Angel player over there or something, and we walk up to our table, we talk about the terrain, super nice guy. We roll to do the first drop. He rolls to get the first drop, and it's the big cathedral set on the sanctuaries. We look at each other, and I'm like, I think you won the game. He's like, yeah, me too. That was literally the discussion. We could have literally
cool just system.
Yeah, cool. Play that. Anyway, so
good game, bro.
Good game, bro. We played it out a little bit, but yeah, it was basically what had happened. So that's it. I think these events are the heart and soul. That's where I think you're going to get the most care and appeal. And not to say like I don't have an issue with events trying to make money. Like why wouldn't events try to make money, right? Like people are putting their time and effort, should get paid. Like that was another thing you had mentioned, Cliff, and I'd heard before too. But I've always been a big proponent, like you pay people, right? So like, for example, I asked Jeremy to do this. I didn't ask Jeremy to like, volunteer his time. Like I'm paying him to do it. I'm paying his gas, I'm paying his meals, and I'm paying his hotel. It's not costing him a dime to come. He's getting paid for his experience, expertise. Like it's not like a super duper high salary. We're like you said, Tim, we're going to have to do a couple of years in the red. But as we get to see where this, where this goes and this grows, then I'll be able to better manage and understand what the budget should look like and, allocate a bit more to that. Yeah. But yeah, that was kind of some of the fundamental things I would like to see change, like the level of professionalism and care towards the actual competitive experience. So like active judging was one of them. So Jeremy and I have judge shirts. So you'll be able to pick us out of a crowd. And we're 1 per 30 players. So we're 2 judges for 60 players. So 1-to-30 ratio. And we'll be there. Yeah. We'll be there up and down the aisles. If people want a judge call, they can, if we notice something like you said, nobody can know all the rules of this game. So if I walk by and I see something that seems odd, I can interrupt the game, intervene, say, okay, this and this and that. Resume the game state. You're both cool. All right, move on. There's been a number of games that I'm sure anybody can say throughout their competitive experience, like they wish they had somebody do that. And we can't promise that we'll be able to catch every single instance. That's not the case, but at least it's a step in the right direction. So those are kind of like I think the big principles that we, want to do to kind of professionalize a little bit, to like just continue to push that a little bit forward. So I don't want to set the expectation. Like, people coming, I hope they really do have a good time. I hope they find it's well organized. I don't know if they're going to leave feeling like this has changed 40K. No, that's obviously not what's going to happen. They will probably leave, say that was a good event. These things were good. These things could improve. And I mean, that's just, I think the one of the big differences is like our commitment to improve every time we do this. So yeah.
I think it's worth noting that like it can sound as if players should have unreasonably high expectations for events, both in terms of professionalization and organization. And this may also sound a little bit snooty, but like, charge us for it, right? Like, I am paying to come to show. Like, I know you had to rent the space. I know you had to buy the terrain. You've put a ton of your own time and like thinking and expertise into building an effective mission pack. You're open to improving it in the future. Like, I'm already in the hole hundreds of dollars for whatever faction I'm bringing, and like dozens of hours, if not hundreds of hours of my own time preparing it. Like, I should be prepared to pay 20 to 30 additional dollars. If that means that like a TO who's done a great job has the ability to like not run in the red and in fact like make things even better the following year. Like, that's really valuable. And I think the player community should probably make a pretty intense effort to internalize that. But conversely, I think like Logan's saying, like, it is fair that like when you pay money for a thing and that thing does not meet the expectations that were described to you, you entirely are in the right to say like, hey, that wasn't enough.
100%. I 100% agree to that. Logan said, and my perspective, it's not limited to the for-profit events. I'm not saying you should be super critical of the volunteer TOs. Like, they're the heart and soul of what made this today, right? If we didn't have them, we wouldn't have this, right?
Yep.
But at the same time, if you are asking people to come to your event, if you're setting this up and you're whatever else, you should still put the effort. Like, if you're not willing to put that effort to make it worth their money and time, then just don't make the effort. Especially now when the events, like Tim was saying, they're multiplying like rabbits. They're everywhere. There's no more. We don't need that one like martyr in the community says, I'll do this. Like, there's like people lining up to do it. So I just think whether it's a for-profit or like just somebody, a dude like me that, got lost in the sauce a bit, I still think that they owe it to the players that they're asking to come. Like, I can't, like you guys, or if you guys live near me, I'm confident you would probably come to support a buddy, but at the same time, it wouldn't make me feel good. Like, you guys are spending money to do this. You get in the hotel, you're driving over, you had to negotiate this with your wife, you're going to end up in the next weekend looking after the 14 kids and she's going to be at the spa because you had to go this weekend. So I have to respect that's like the sacrifice you have to make coming to the event. So then, to meet that is delivering on it. So that's kind of the big thing that we're focused on. And I think we're going to get there. Yeah, for sure.
Cool. Let's move on to questions. I notified the Discord that you were a guest today. We actually had a bunch of questions. Half of them were making fun of you. And then we have we also have some questions from last week, shortly, or the previous week, running up to this show. So first from Old Head Rickard, AU with umlauts over both of them. I never actually understood what that meant. Need my fellow X1s to chime in with opinions. The should be a fun GT event I signed up for, accidentally on purpose, sort of turned into a major. Do I still do a bring an army I've used twice approach, or do I pivot to use an army I've actually used? So, in my opinion, the distinction between GT and major is really a moving target, and it doesn't actually mean much. And your goals for a multi-day event should generally not really change based on the label of the event. You're still giving up a weekend to go to an event. you shouldn't feel an external pressure just because 10 more people signed up or 20 more people signed up. So if you were looking for like specific advice on what list you should bring, I'm not going to give you that because, in my opinion, I think you should actually just reframe your expectations overall. And it's really going to come down. I know it seems like a cop out, but it's what are your goals going to be? Are your goals going to be to test? Ever since joining Team USA, it's weird. All the single events to me have like now just become like testing grounds. Like I legitimately don't care about like my placings like ITC or an event or something like that. Like a lot of times I'll just bring a list where it's kind of like, I have some reps. I don't have quite as many reps as I want to. I've played against my teammates over and over and over again, but there's gaps in playstyles and factions that I want to test this into. So let's just bring it and throw it into the wild, especially because people, when there's clocks and there's events and there's like stakes, however small, involved, like they bring that little bit of extra like hot sauce to their play usually, and that's good testing. That's what I do with the World Eaters. I played 5 games and I was like, let's get 5 more. So I brought them to a GT, and I learned a lot from that one actually. I even posted a breakdown. So to come back to the question, which I masterfully didn't answer. What are your expectations? Do you want to do the best you can? Then yeah, I would. If your army is, I wouldn't go like so much as like S tier, A tier, B tier, but I think generally you can kind of make the call. Is my faction in the top third, middle third, or bottom third of like kind of like the power brand of the entire game? Then if it's in that top third and you have like, and you're comfortable with it, then yeah, bring that one. You really only want to swap to an army if the raw power of the army is going to outweigh your loss of reps with it. And even then, my personal standard is like 5 to 10 games, and it better be like really powerful. I'm talking about like release orcs, release iron hands, stuff like that. Yeah. It's got to be like I'm talking about where you know like you have like 3 stratagems memorized, you have like 2 data sheets memorized, and you're just blowing people out. Yeah, you're just like blowing people out. And if someone actually makes a game of it, then you're like flipping your book, you're trying to find like the melee stats on like your iron hands like tech breed or something like that. You know, like, but like generally, there is a give and take to faction loyalty versus faction swapping. Like sometimes faction loyalty, like, hey, sometimes your faction just sucks. Like, I'm sorry. Like it is what it is until GW learns how to write rules. Having a stable is always better. But also it's like a Venn diagram. You want to kind of be in the middle of like faction power / faction mastery. But again, it just comes down to what your goals for the event are. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I mean, it's all about expectation setting, right? Like, do I want to go and do something goofy and sort of explore, like, maybe I've been wondering how a given army concept would do in a more competitive environment, because I'm like, I think I'm onto something here. I'm like, okay, cool, let me go try it out in an actual competitive environment, see how it goes. But if I know that this is going to be like one of the only sort of like larger sized events I might get to in a given year, and I actually do want to like personally do as well as I can, I might go with something that, assuming it's in that upper third, go with something that I have a little more practice with, just so I don't have to make as many difficult decisions over the course of the game, or spend as much time trying to figure out what I need to do in a given scenario.
Yeah, I'm along those lines too. Not being able to get out to events all that often. I mean, I won't be playing at All's Dust because I'm judging, but should I, like, if I were playing at that one, being one of the kind of infrequent ones I can attend, for me it would be always, what would I find the most fun to play, but also the best chance for success out of what I own and that I can competently kind of like use. I mean, there's a lot of great armies, like GSC is a great one, but I couldn't pick that up and make anything of it, within, a few weeks of an event. Right. So, for example, my take, I own Thousand Suns, Necrons, and Demons and Votan right now that I could play. And out of those 4, Thousand Suns I know the best, but we know what happened to Thousand Suns and Arcs, so I'd be like, oh, a little hesitant there. And the second one would be, Votan are okay, but you need to know how to use them to score because their scoring is a little bit weaker right now. And so demons just have a more linear game plan, have good secondaries, and I've been playing demons since I don't know 7th edition, 6th edition. So that's kind of where I'd go, but that's what I would suggest.
Demons also have the strength of having multiple builds right now, which is a great place to be. Whereas like Gene Circle, we can see they're doing really, really, really well, but they really only have like one build right now. Eric LaThor's is kind of he's the one who created that build. He's kind of brainstorming a new build with trucks. It's on his blog. But generally, they don't really have something. If they get hit hard with something balance pass, like they may not have something to pivot to.
Yeah.
Whereas demons they demonstrate the ability to roll with the punches.
But yeah, I guess bottom line, like what these guys said, it's really you have to look inwardly what you want to accomplish. What are your goals for that event? Be honest with yourself. Maybe you want to win, but you want to go with a meme list because you're afraid of trying. And that happens too. Like sometimes you get nervous about actually committing to being competitive in events. So you take something that, you hamstring yourself to give yourself an out. So be honest with yourself. If you want to go win, bring the army you think is going to do the best, that you have the most reps in, and take that. If you just want to go have a couple of beers and have fun and whatever is going to help you do that, then do that. I mean, there's no wrong answer, right? At the end of the day, those, like we all said, those ITC points, they don't bury them with you. So
they don't really matter.
Yeah.
Okay. Next question. Also from Old Head Rickard AU. I mean, maybe that means he's from Austria. I'm not sure. It wouldn't surprise me. We have a lot of people in Europe.
No, he's a friend of mine from the area. Rickard.
Oh, okay. What is? Do you know what the AU stands for?
I have no idea what.
Ask him next time. Okay. So he says, what would you say should be the 40K priorities for people juggling the hobby, family, work? 2, how does it feel that Dust accidentally on purpose became a major? So part 1, I'll just answer part 1 because I can't really answer part 2. Old Head Ricker keeps trying to hand us the reins to his
disagree with the premise,
and I refuse to take the reins of your emotional well-being, Rickard. I'm not doing it. That's a decision really only you can make. It's just, I would say, usually like between hobby, family, work. It's 40K is a multifaceted kind of hobby, and you can kind of cleave to it and do like one thing well, or you can do like a couple things like kind of okay. And I have chosen, for me, I've chosen to try to be like excellence in playing, and I let the hobby slide a little bit. But I also don't enter any kind of like hobbying or painting competitions. I have been complimented before on my hobbying. Because sometimes I'll randomly, like every 5th model, I'll actually sit there and just it just catches my eye. I'm like assembly lining 5, 10 of them or whatever. And then like one of them, I really like to sculpt. And so all of a sudden I just go down a rabbit hole and I pick out like little buckles and I pick out the details and I paint like the little fleur-de-lis on the sisters, that are like 1 micron wide and stuff like that. But I do that for me. Like I have actually, let me see if I can find it. Hold on, you're gonna get a nice shot of my caboose.
Yeah, here we go.
Yes, there we go. The goods.
So look at this. My sisters. Hold this up so you can see it. This is my Triumph.
Oh yeah,
that's awesome.
And look at that. Those angels, which immediately broke off. Right. I put the snow on their shoulders. Everything. Like, look at that.
It looks great.
I've never entered a painting competition. I actually won the first GT I brought sisters to. I got second best, like painted or whatever. I didn't enter. Someone else entered my army for me. And then they were like, come and like give me like critique and everything. And I was like, hey, fuck you, man. I didn't enter my army. Like, I did that for me. I just did that for me. I just like the model and I painted it for me. But I never like I never hitched myself to that burden of hobbying excellence, because for me, it's like, because then it becomes work. And so I don't want to feel compelled to paint models I don't like painting to a high standard and sacrifice my time. Some people do. That's fine. That's totally the thing. if I have a model that I want, I do enjoy painting. I don't like assembling. I do enjoy painting, but I only enjoy painting the models I want to paint. But then there's models I have to paint for playing the game. So if it's a model I like to paint, I'll paint it. I'll paint it well if I have time. If it's not, I won't. But really, you're the only one that can make that decision.
Yeah, I'm historic. Like, I'd say closer to the Warhammer Fantasy Battle timeline. I was more the hobbyist versus the gamer. I was more concerned about like how everything looked and whatever else. But then, as the games have evolved since, the metas have shifted. Like back in the day in Warhammer Fantasy, you got your book and like, good luck. 10 years, that was your book. Nothing would change that. And so you had the time to make these beautiful armies and whatever else, and then still kind of compete a little bit. Anyways, so long story short, till now, I'm less kind of the painter and more like Tim, right? I'm more focused on performance, and at least within the time that I have to commit to performance. Like I can't play 6 games a week and whatever else, so I have to manage that with the whole family thing. But I'm more performance. So now, like sometimes the hobby stuff, I do it to get armies on the table. I do my best to make them look decently good. But sometimes, I make hobby concessions. Like I'm painting up some demonettes right now, and I'm just hoping people don't pick them up to look at them closely. That's kind of my my thing. And that's it. You decide again what your goal is. If you want to win games, then you find the 1 or 2 armies that you like that are really good, and you focus on them, and don't spend as much time painting them. But yeah, that's up to you. That's we can't decide for you.
Yeah. I think there are like clearly indirect ways to engage with 40K. Like I obviously spend a lot of time on like making data available to everybody that plays this game, because I like the idea of people who really care about what happens on the table having as much information about how the game should operate before they arrive at the table, so that they're playing a real game. Like I want like skill-based outcomes of games played. That said, I have been and probably will always be a like hobby first nerd. Like I'm powerfully motivated to take good looking models and paint them up really well and get them on the table, which is why I have like a Trigon and a Moloch and in my Tyranid. Like they're not good, but they look beautiful. And so often I find myself, my army list making decisions are informed by like things that I would like to make look good on the table, and like try to just figure out some way to make them work. I care a lot about that stuff.
Cool. Next question from Grant H. This one is definitely directed at Nick. What was your favorite bad take about the article you wrote on Stat Check? Parentheses, the competing one, which was very good in my opinion.
Oh, it was a great article.
It was a great article.
So I have to preface this by saying, I wrote the article and I submitted it to the guys, but that article is much different from the original one. Like Cliff, Nathan, Jeremy, everybody participated in building it and making it better. So like I can't take all the credit. The guys put a lot of work into it as well. I must admit, we
had to clean up your language a lot, and I like for a mild mannered guy, like I was really surprised how much you were cursing in that article. I was a little bit disappointed.
yeah, exactly. I was joking with Jeremy. I was like, Cliff really likes to be out there, right? To really chase the.
I'm quite direct.
He's very direct, right? I'm like, hey man, it's his website. I'll put it in there. But anyway, so bad takes. I'm gonna be honest. We've received like a ton of amazing feedback from that article. Actually, I saw that question earlier in the Discord, so I googled the Reddit. It was easy to find. Actually, Googled that Reddit thread, and it was actually a lot of people that related to it and said, hey, you know what? Some of them even said this article changed my perspective. Like, okay, well, that's nice. But yeah, this is how I like to see it too. You have to change your expectations, blah, blah, blah. And so I wouldn't say there was like a ton of really bad takes. There were some that like people just didn't like the argument, right? They still felt that, that they shouldn't have to spend a ton of money every whatever certain period of time to kind of catch up to the meta and compete. I mean, maybe people like Tim and I that have like long-standing collections, like demons for me, for example. Pivoting into demons wasn't a big pivot. I owned all of it, right? I don't know if I had to buy anything, to be honest. I just had to paint it. So eventually that goes away if you're in it long enough. I mean, some people said that getting good is just buying good stuff, and it's like, well, not really, right? There is a reason why the same people win consistently, regardless of what army. Like it's in the NASCAR metaphor.
If you're kind of at the bottom of the hill looking up, it could certainly seem that way. But there's some really big leaps and bounds you can make by like bringing the best army and then making a good list out of like the units from the best units from the best book, and then the synergies. I mean,
and piloting it.
The power scale goes like this, but there are diminishing returns at the top. Everyone's doing that, so at that point, it's not a golden ticket; it's just table stakes.
Yep.
I mean, some people had the expectation that they want to take that same, like they would say, the same kind of firstborn Ultramarine army they've had for 20 years, and they want to be able to compete with that collection that they've never changed, never updated. You know, they're still Goblin Green bases, and that's their expectation, which I don't know if is a realistic expectation. Another one said they wanted to see the Leafs win a game. I said, like, again, unrealistic expectations. Another one called us tech job bros, funded by Patreon. So I'm not a tech job bro, but yeah, I mean,
that was
a fun one. Yeah, like
that was the most peculiar call out I've ever heard in my life.
Like, sir, we give all this away for free, buddy. Like,
I know, like all this stuff you get for free. This article,
you get ads.
Those bros from Silicon Valley coming to take my wargaming.
Yeah. Oh, geez. Yeah. And then I mean, at some point on Facebook, Stephen Box had replied, but that wasn't like a bad take. That was just kind of a back and forth.
Yeah.
Like we disagree fundamentally with how you want to see competitive gaming shaped, but that's your opinion. I mean, I don't think it's. I disagree with it, but I wouldn't say it's like a wild bad take like some of these other ones. But otherwise, I would like to say that 95% of the feedback that I've seen on the article was actually quite positive. So,
cool. Next question from Tom H. Two-part question: Are people from Quebec as bad as they say? I haven't actually been to Quebec since I was a teenager, and I don't really remember much from then. But my adult life, the last time I was in Quebec was, I think I made a connection in the airport. You know, I wasn't really impressed, but I mean, it's also an airport. I'll be honest, I'm more preferential to Western Canada myself, but I'm also like a big outdoor guy, so I like going to Banff and the Rockies and stuff like that. So, but as far as the people, I can't really make a judgment call. The second part of the question is best way to avoid picking up bad habit, doing a lot of solo practice. I'm not really sure what solo practice you mean. Like if you mean like practicing deployments or stuff like that, like that stuff is good as like a drill, but it's like learning to do football or basketball by only doing drills. You can't really do it. Solo 40K practice sounds like solo wrestling practice, if that makes sense. Like I don't know how you get from like point A to point B solo. You can definitely like sprinkle it in as a supplement, but
I mean, there's kind of stuff that you could do, like, you know, practice deployment.
Yeah, right? Like you practice deployment,
moves.
your first couple moves, you know, like how do I maximize points scored? Like if my opponent is not actively disrupting my turn one, I went first movement, that kind of thing. But like
it's limited, right?
That's such like, it's like, well, how do I avoid drowning if I'm only sticking a toe in the water? I'm like, that's not really the issue at hand here.
So my background is like competitive Thai boxing, and it would be like just hitting pads and then going to compete. Right, all you're doing is hitting pads, and then you're like,
you're going from pads, and then like now, boom, you're like live in a match. Like,
yeah, exactly. Like, oh boy,
that's it's not the bad habits of the issue here, man. Tom, I don't know what your situation is. Like, I don't know if it's like a time thing or like an access thing or whatever. But like, reach out to us. Like, I don't know if you're in the Vibe Check League, but like that, you know, I'm gonna plug it again. That's a great thing to get into. But like, if it's an access thing or something like that, like reach out to us and like maybe we can like work with you and try to like find a way for you to actually get some like real live like actual practice. As far as the Quebec thing, like Nick, do you want to take that?
Yeah, so I was born in Quebec, so I mean, having won a GT and, you know, ruthless GT against a lot of WTC hopefuls and players, you know, not bad. 501 at LVO, so I think I'm not too bad. The actual WTC team for Team Canada has a disproportionate number of Quebec players. Francois Lalonde, one of the top players in the country, is from Quebec. Dominic Carrette, Bruno Choquette. Like, there's a lot of top Quebec talent. I mean, of course, it's a francophone province, so there is that kind of barrier, that is that kind of distance between the rest of like the continent that all speak mainly English. I mean, I guess more south there's probably a lot of Spanish, so that's I can't speak to that, but yeah, so I can see how there's like kind of that distance that would give people the impression that there's just nothing happening there. But no, there's a lot of strong competitive. I mean, those players live close to Ottawa.
I'm not sure if he was talking about if like as far as 40K skill, or if he was just making a dig at French Canadians, both of which are kind of hilarious. Yeah, broadly both are hilarious.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. Go to Montreal. Montreal's a lot of fun. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Let me unmute myself. There you go. Next question from Canhammer Francois.
Speak of the devil.
Yeah, speak of the devil. That's not a French Canadian name. Tempted to troll Nick, but instead here's a serious question. What was the biggest challenge in organizing your first event?
So we talked about a bit like the dad thing, like how do you manage it with with all the dad and professional responsibilities. And to be honest, event organization is a heck of a lot easier to accomplish as a working professional dad than being a competitive 40K player. Because I mean, maybe it's a bit similar to like running the stats the dashboard, Cliff. But like in between meetings, you can send an email, you can make a phone call, right? You can text some people and coordinate, right? Like that's kind of easy stuff you can manage in your calendar. But like to set up an evening game, have my buddy here while you're trying to put the kid to bed and like get some reps in, and the wife wants to go to bed, and you're up at like 5:30 in the morning, so you don't want to be up till midnight, right? That is the hard part of like trying to be a competitive 40K. So as far as like what was my that's the dad thing, but for like what was the big concern for this, the hardest part was probably the mental part at first. Like the coordination stuff, it doesn't bother me. It's just making phone calls and setting up Excel sheets and giving out credit cards. It was the mental thing. Like, I'm going to do this, and nobody wants to do something and it to fail, right? Nobody chooses to fail, right? So yeah, the big thing was like, I'm going to do this, and what if nobody shows up, right? And I have this like all the confetti, all the dressings, all the food, and all the whatever, and all the train, and there's like a small RTT. I mean, it's not the end of the world. I've obviously been through a little bit worse, but at the same time, it still would have been disappointing. And so like that was the kind of the more complicated thing. Of course, that went away when, like I said, a couple of weeks ago, we were hovering around the 40 registered, and I'm like, okay, cool. We're like breaking even ish. It's not going to cost me a ton of money to run this. That's fine. It's not like this big event, but whatever. 40 is still good. But then Francois texts me like a Sunday night. He's like, hey, do you know you're at 46? We were at 42 like earlier morning. He's really invested in it. He's the one that actually named the event, by the way. All His Dust. He's the one that came up with that. Anyway, so then he texts me again in the morning. He's like, we're at 52. I'm like, what? And then I made a post on Facebook, and like in that day it's sold, and I had people text me, and now we're at like, I don't know, 11 people on the wait list. It went wild. So anyways, obviously those that headspace problem went away when it's like, okay, now we've got this long wait list, and we got a lot of people now.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Sweet. So since it's the topic, this is from Derek in the a staple in the Discord. Since it's the topic, do you prefer go-wide type prize support structures for events? If so, what kind of extra rewards besides placing? I can also add something to this before I toss it over to the actual TO. Locally, what we do at our event is at Hey Wanna Play, which is the local game store down here in South Florida, probably the biggest one, with inventory that really rivals a lot of GW stores, if not surpasses them. Huge gaming space too. Can easily hold a large GT or a small major. And then Chris, the owner and the TO, also has contingency plans in place once his terrain kind of can support it to get to those higher numbers. He has contingency plans to open up additional like areas for like gaming and stuff like that. So he's already kind of like looking to an eye in the future. But I really like what he does, where he he does the typical prize support where it's the top 4 sliding scale. And then it was pretty decent too. This last event, we had like 45 people. 4th place got $85 store credit, and then like it like rocketed up from there.
Nice.
I think like Mark like walked out of there with like two of the Space Marine like the new like box sets that they had released or something like that. Like so he was like walking out of those like that. It's a lot of prize support.
Yeah.
But then they do a raffle ticket. It's very popular. We do it with the RTTs and the GTs, and like tons of people like come like just for those. And people even joke around how like sometimes like people joke about like throwing their games just like to get into the raffle, stuff like that. But yeah, no, they do a lot. And I mean, like I won a raffle once, and like I think my record for like most expensive kit was like a Forge Fiend or something like that. I got them in the raffle. So like they people like this last GT, one of our teammates, he got a Riptide in the raffle. So like there's some like it was like some big prizes. But they give away a ticket for submitting a list before deadline. Real low barrier, real low bar there. Some people still run into it.
Yeah.
But if you submit the list on time before cutoff, boom, you get a raffle ticket. And then every single loss you get a raffle ticket. So in a 5-round event, if you just go 0 and out, wooden spoon, you're gonna have 6 raffle tickets, with like a pretty serious chance of getting it. And then I think he also has like a 2 prize limit, so you're not one and done. You can get like 2 prizes.
Mm-hmm.
But that's been really good. I think that's also that just to the fact that the terrain has been good, that it's been timely. There's been some growing pains, but people can tell that he's making an effort. And that's why the event in the store has been really been improving. What do you think, Nick?
Yeah, I've had like talk to a lot of people about this to get their impressions, and some you get the people think the winners should have some sort of prize support kind of reflective of the position that they've won. Other people like that just attending gives them some chance of getting prize, because they're, like we said, most people going to an event aren't going to win it. Only one of them is going to win it, right? But most people going to events don't regularly have the expectation of winning. So if the prize support only goes to the top players, they'll never actually get anything. So I've tried to cut a balance there. Luckily, like you said, you have good support. This event has been a big of a community effort, and I'll say, for example, early in the planning process, I got a message from somebody I had never met, who is a retired military veteran, and said like, yeah, I live in a town not too far, and one of my hobbies is smithing. And he's like, do you want to give away a sword? I was like, I'm not going to say yes, obviously. But I'm like, I was honest with him at the time. I was like, to be honest, like, we've got like 20 people registered. I'm in the red right now. And unless this gets better, I can't pay you for it. So like, I really appreciate that offer. But, I was like, no. Do you want to give away a sword? I was like, I will take this, right? Don't be polite. I will. Anyway, so yeah, he's Tim from Hammerstruck Smithing. So like he's the one that gave the Kopesh, and people have been talking about it. So we had a Kopesh Smith to give the winner. And on top of that, like we have a good friend of mine, Dan. He runs the Red Dragon Ottawa. He's in the Discord. He's in the StatCheck Discord. He's been buying up everybody's armies that they've been selling in the Bartertown. Anyways, yeah, he's super amazing, like in terms of providing prize support and whatnot. So the way we've done it is, I've had some kind of trophies 3D printed for number 2 and 3. We've got the Kopesh for number 1. And then, like you said, those kind of whatever those holiday Space Marine style boxes for the first 2 winners, and then a Combat Patrol for the 3rd. I've also kind of, over the years of winning and getting 2nd or 3rd place at GTs, I've collected a closet full of stuff that never gets touched. So a lot of that's coming out and will be given. So like I have a Great Unclean one. That's going to be just like kind of a random prize. Abaddon is a random prize. Obviously this is going to be very chaos focused because I'm a chaos player. Some other stuff. I have a funny prize for the person that gets the wooden spoon prize. So last 2 years ago, my buddy Dan and I wanted to he was like, hey, Conquest sounds awesome. Let's do Conquest. I'm like, yeah, man, let's do it. So I bought an army, he bought an army, and he played a bit of it, and I hadn't touched it all because I can't do 2 games. So then my wife's been mentioning that for years at this point. Like, what are you doing with those boxes? So now I'm like, you know what? In Conquest, you actually have to roll low to succeed. So hey, the person who's the worst in the event, who doesn't perform, obviously it's dice, obviously. So we'll say, well, here's a Conquest army. And, that's where your skills will shine in rolling low in Conquest. And so, anyways, it's just a joke. Obviously, we don't want to encourage people to leave the community, but it's just it gives you something. It's a prize, right?
That's great. Those miniatures are also fantastic.
Oh yeah, Conquest. Legit, if I had the time, I'd play that. I'd play that game. I just don't have the bandwidth. I hardly have the bandwidth to play.
Same here. I would totally play it if I had time. Those miniatures look really good. I've seen some people play it at the local store, and they are really nice. Okay, last question and then we'll go into the comments. I think I saw 1 or 2 questions in the comments. This is from Sam Lemon from the Discord. Hey, Nick, can we expect to see you back on Can't Hammer Podcast sometime in the future?
I think I appreciate that. Thank you. I think that right now I've been a little busy, doing other things, with the All Is Dust stuff. We have other projects going on. I know those guys have a kind of a different vision for where Can Hammer is going, and they have a kind of a real good focus. So they're going to do that. I'm also a bit camera shy at times. So anyways, probably not. But I'm in the Stat Check Discord. So if anybody wants to hit me up and chat, whatever, more than happy to chat.
Cool. And then the last question from the comments from Jared Whitehead. Any tips for trying to build and unify a community of players from the local store to building something a bit larger across state? So for me locally, once a few years after I'd moved to Florida, when I took the job here, and I was settling down, I was getting back into Warhammer after a 15-year hiatus. I was looking for local stores. I basically was just, initially just Google searching, trying to find where the local stores were, where the playing was. I just looked out that there was a little small store, small at the time, called Hey Wanna Play. That was recently under new ownership, 3 minutes from my house. So it just couldn't get better than that. And that was there was one in Miami. There was one a little bit north of here. There was one over in Palm Beach, which is an hour drive from me, too far. And there was one 3 minutes from my house. And when I went in there, this store had the initial friendly vibe. It was clean. The community immediately people over there playing. They introduced themselves. They were kind of they were so excited to talk about the game, introduce stuff like that. And I kind of slowly integrated myself, but just because of my time, because of my shift work at the time, the only time I could regularly get games in was Tuesday evenings. And so I posted a message, I said, hey, is anyone available Tuesday evening for a game? And my buddy, now a teammate on Miami Dice, Ben, he said, hey man, I'll be your Huckleberry. And then we just started kind of just meeting up every Tuesday and then playing. And then, we got a couple other people on the rotation, and then it ended up being 3 or 4 of us. And then there was a bar next door, so we'd all go out and have beers afterwards. The store owner, Chris, he would shut down. He would have beers with us too. And so it just kind of became a thing where there was about a group of 5 or 6 of us. And then we played games, until close. And then we go to the bar with the store owner and we talk 40K or just whatever kind of bullshit and have 2 or 3 beers, and then we go home. It was great. And that kind of became our thing. And once that core got established, people just started coming like moths to a flame. And it just kind of snowballed from there. And now, even though I can't really make Tuesday night games anymore, and then also that, I don't want to sound dismissive, but I don't generally show up to the store and just play pickup games with general population because I just don't want to blow people out. It's not super helpful for me, and I don't think it's particularly encouraging to the community. Even if I preface I'll definitely in the store Discord, people are always welcome to tag me if they want the smoke and be like, hey, look for a competitive game, stuff like that or whatever. But generally, our local competitive games, we keep it in house to Miami Dice because we know what's up. And then outside of there, I'm playing against people on Team USA or scrims or stuff like that. But if anyone local ever wants, like, to get a competitive game, like, I am available. But I don't actively go out looking for pickup games because my time is limited. I'm only going to play competitive games. And I don't want to blow people out that way. But anyhow, that's a little bit of a tangent. That kind of formed into Tuesday nights became Warhammer 40K night. Sundays kind of, and apparently that happened. That's happened with multiple games in our store. Dungeons and Dragons happens on Wednesdays. Sigmar Sundays, Sunday afternoons. It's all about Sigmar. Saturdays kind of has been traditionally the 40K day at the store, but basically Tuesday night kind of morphed into 40K night. And so even now, if you go to Hey Wanna Play, which is now a big store, if you go there on a Tuesday night, there's going to be anywhere from 10 to 20 people just playing games. And that's kind of cool because that started from me and this one guy just beating up regularly every Tuesday 4 or 5 years ago. And now it's just become like this thing. So I don't know if that's the way to build a community, but that's certainly one way. It's just consistency and being available, and definitely like a little bit of like Field of Dreams, like if you build it, they will come sort of thing. So that was my experience with community building. What about you guys?
I mean, 100%. Yeah, it starts small, like anything, right? You're not going to wake up one morning and you're going to have 50 people that are, part of this large group running things and whatever else. It starts with a couple of you and your friends, or find a store and you just start a club and you advertise it. You be inclusive, you be open, and whatnot. And like, it'll grow organically. If you're a good crew, and my experience, if you're nice, they will come. It's that simple. It's just, and I think in our local area, one of the biggest community builders is, like I said, my friend Dan. His stores are really now the focal point of 40K and competitive 40K in Ottawa, but because he's just that guy that's always thinking about how to make it more open for people. Like, even, for example, I won't go into all the detail like you've already said, Tim, but he realized at one point that we had built such a strong competitive community that he was worried now that was having the reverse effect where, you're going to scare people away. So he actually split events, and he told a bunch of us, we can't go to this one style RTT because and Jeremy would run them, and that was the build RTT. Like, these guys are going in there and they're like going there to learn, not get like face stomped by, like dudes, for 3 rounds, because that's just what it was. And they would eventually just graduate then to the bigger RTT, and then they would start stomping us. So it's like, I don't know. Like, I don't know if there's one right way to do it. I think, but the one way you should approach it is like that, like being inclusive, being there, being open, and I mean, it'll probably go from there, right?
Yeah, we're starting we finally are starting a slow grow league at my FLGS, and we've had like 30 people have signed up in the last like 3 weeks. They're super interested in it. We're using like 500, 1,000, 1,500 to close it out. And we're also using the Crusade rules, which is interesting. But I think there is a level, that shift from like standardized competitive play to Crusade, I think, has drawn in a lot of people that otherwise would not have been interested because they're viewing it as a less intense version of like match play gaming, even though we're still playing match play games. So I think there's definitely an element of like lowering the barrier to entry is to the lowest point it can possibly be, while still maintaining some semblance of like a gaming experience, can help a lot to get people in the door. And then once that's done, doing a good job of sort of like thoughtfully reining in players that might otherwise push a little too quickly. Yeah. Because we have already seen a few people where it's like, oh, cool, I need to have a conversation with the organizer. Like, there are a few people here looking for something more intense. Like, you should pair them into me, and like, let's make sure that we don't scare off people that are admittedly a little bit anxious about coming out to the store for the first time.
Yeah, it's we've had that same thing locally. We do, from what I've seen, the store does pretty regularly. I think like it looks like every like 2 or 3 months they do like casual events, and it'll literally be like one-sided kind of narrative, something like that, where they'll have like the forces of the pyramid versus forces of chaos, and so like anyone could show up and just like, and if you showed up late, like boom, like now you're reserves. So like here's your army, boom, just get in there,
Awesome.
you know. And they'll have like a castle on one side, and they'll have like a kind of like open field on the other, and it's just you're literally just putting your stuff in there and you're just shooting stuff. Like someone showed up with like a 3D printed Titan that showed up, you know, like it was just like just all sorts of cool stuff. And then we'd also kind of have like we have the it's starting to get a little more formal now, but we have like almost like a stratification kind of going on. Where we have like the actual like true like ultra casuals, and then we kind of have like the ones who are looking for like more of like a balanced match play experience. They're not quite what you would call competitive, but they realize, you know, the community is getting a little bit more aware of like what's considered a good rule set and what isn't. And I think most people kind of like are starting to realize that GW doesn't really have the tightest of rule sets. So they are looking for more like a match play experience. But they're still like very new. And our store owner is pretty good like intervening and like saying like, oh, you should pair with these guys, you should pair with these guys, or like come in at this time on this day. That's when this group kind of like plays, whatever. And it's like we have that group. We have like the group of guys who are looking to get in competitive, but they're still like, you know, they're still like green behind the ears, you know, like sometimes you'll overhear them and they're kind of like spouting their hot takes or stuff like that. And you're kind of like, but you just kind of like leave it alone. And then you have like the group who's like in there kind of like multiple times a week. And they are like newbie veterans, you know, and like they're starting to from the point where they're starting to reach out to our local team, Miami Dice, and they're kind of like asking some of us for games and stuff like that. And like, you know, we put them, we descend from our little like competitive tower, you know, and we'll suplex them, but then afterwards, like we'll break down the game and stuff like that. But they keep coming back. Like they don't leave, they come back, you know, they take that, they go play amongst their group. And then finally we have Miami Dice, which is our local competitive team, who is obviously like everyone there is for the most part pretty competitive. But there's a little bit of a vibe check, you know, like there's no real, I don't want to say it's like a real organization, but like there's a few people that we were considering letting in. And then all of a sudden, like they like showed their ass at an event and stuff like that. We're like, ooh, like you can't, sorry, man. Like we can't pull you in if you're going to be like acting like that at an event. Like there's just no way. We don't want a name associated with that kind of stuff. So it's kind of cool. It's like almost like a 4 or 5 level kind of stratification that we have going on locally in the community. And I think it's healthy to have that stratification where you're kind of like butting up to the level above and the level below you. But as soon as you start intermingling more than that, it's like you're coming in like a little too hot, and it can be like frustrating because like now you're not adjacent anymore, and now 2 people show up to a game and like the expectations are different about like what they want out of a game or like how they feel about game design, game philosophy. Like one person thinks it's a skill-based game, other person thinks it's a dice-based game. One person is literally just there trying to like test something and get better. The other person is actively running from a bad experience, which is like losing a game or feeling like they can't do anything. So that's how our community's turned out. Exactly.
Yeah. It's kind of like having a fight club and you got your new guy that's, you know, trying to get into shape, not that, you know, into fighting, but then you bring him to the sparring class and he's pairing up your guy against your guy that's prepping for his UFC event. Like that's just kind of a complete mismatch right there in terms of they're both going to that club. They're both in the space enjoying the club and stuff like that, but they're there for a bit different reasons. So at that point in time, their interests aren't that compatible. So, you know, maybe later, but at that point in time, maybe they need to be doing something separate. Yeah. So that makes sense.
Cool. Cliff, that's all our questions, man. Do we have anything else on the docket or you want to take this home?
I think that's it. I think it's time to close out. Thanks to y'all for hanging in there with us. It's been a long ride. Thanks to Nick for hanging in there with us and answering all the questions in such a lovely manner. It was great meeting you at LVO. Really excited for all his deaths. Really sad that I won't be able to be there, but you know, such is the family life. It's going to be a great event. Like it's going to be awesome.
We're looking forward to it. Thank you.
The standard places you can check us out. Again, you can hit us on YouTube, which you're already watching us on, youtube.com/@statcheck. Stat-check.com is our home website. That's where you find all the metadata dashboard, our player CRS and ELO scores, the scores that actually indicate how good you are at 40K, and not necessarily how many games you played at really big events. No shade intended. That's a lie. Shade was intended. And patreon.com/statcheck, where you're going to find us. Maybe we'll throw us a little bit of cash. Join our Discord. Discord's a great community. It's like, you hear this a lot from 40K spots, right? Like, we've built this great community, blah, 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 blah. Legitimately, our Discord is a really, really cool place. People are really positive. There's a tons of excellent players there. Lots of great advice going around. Random access to leagues. I'm randomly posting workouts for us to do regularly because as a means of getting myself in shape and getting everybody else in shape. It's just like cool stuff going on. So join us if you can. We'll see you in a couple of weeks. Let us know how this went. We'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for having me,
Nick,
guys. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, Nick, thanks for being on the show. And to our viewers, thank you guys. We love you, and we'll see you in the Discord.
Bye-bye.